Hello, America, world, Connecticut, Weathersfield. We are in a semi-ancient trap that was a method, that is a method that is still relevant. And where it is relevant, it is being and having been replaced by other things, blames for what it caused. For example, the breaching method, the human fact treating nature breaching method, that were the crazy, worse than witch trial slavery laws against everyone sickly distinctly, too. Consciously against the course of black pupils, whites of eyes, abridged. Therefore, the Constitution abridged. Formally, and everyone else, inclusion with each other, inclusion with the breaching method. And that's also including the countries that were also programming themselves by it. This used database relationships since before computers, where they are manifest, where and how we are, sense and sensibilities, as the human volume abridged. For example, sense and sensibilities use Jane Austen's phrase, reportedly. These are archaeological evidences. See, people speak about sources. One of the places truths are used for lies. Truths are put between lies. And all that is kept in collusion with overt lies. And to where and to how. At each age of fact-checking nature. At each location, formal and other. These are identity of the grounds. Identity of relationship to itself. And the value of that. For example, that works. The way it works, computers have to mimic this. How 5 distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature are also manifest distinct, where and how they are hyper discernibly with science. Bound, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously further. And this is regarding where and how. Being hyper invisible but still discernible to an extent. When we get into this, it comes with the value of explaining the value of Leith of Hadith, as it really was, most probably, having been about by the ancients with pantheism, since before modern religions, religious messengers. Don't forget, we know to an extent, we're obviously about the scientists being and having been criminally foreign influenced, abridged from the course of being led by that which is. Positive onto itself, where and how it is making is an only increasing identity of volume. We know that space / existence, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as itself. But we know other as shock and awe. No, quote, shock and awe. I don't know who made that up, but it was what was formerly told to us. Where there's everyone's a victim, having blamed and or having self-valued blamed. on other things other than ourselves. Again, and or that person was attached to fake words, changed words, and or was hurt by relativity of means to means to discern what is actually recorded through time and what is actually being recorded now and what is actually to come by observing recorded conscious uses that were simultaneously denied of database solution stacking and then speaking things and wire crimes illusion stacking. How getting away with such, how having gotten away with such. More and more, this is dependent upon all the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, where hundreds of people are going into courts, daily and things like that. And shootings, there was already reported 30 shootings in Hartford this year alone. There are only like 300 streets in Hartford. And this was designed since before our founders were even born. The suburbs were designed. The scale was, and with slavery north and south, sickly distinctly relevant to and as means to discern the both the invisible but the hyper invisible possession of everyone, sickly distinctly by the breaching method, non-distinctly also. That had those roles progressed. So looking at it relative to Native Americans against colonists, and then further, the species still met a bridge from that which is hyper-native, which we were all separated from, not only from the memory of the education, what really things were like, how really to conceive what's practical or not. So I want to bring into other. So in other words, we have to. Well, one of the things we could do is by change what with the new connect with these all the where the subjects connect, and the relevance of such has been denied. This breaching method knew that it was going to prevent finite. Only an individual can defend the finite, an individual voice. The breaching method, again, it employed identity, ground, locations, voice. It made everyone have nave, Knave, reactions, non-reactions. And or they just attach you to fake words, change words. Anyway, where they're having everyone perceived through other people, relevant to connected uses of it, needing to be described by anyone who's gonna use the short words. Where and how are this relevant? For example, we're better than a microscope and a telescope is the hyperscope, for example, as the increasing relevance of the revelations that come simply by knowing we have black pupils and whites of eyes, and the Native Americans were hurt sickly distinctly by us by colonization, even though we weren't born. And when you examine that And if you allow science with it, they were already colonized themselves. They were already forced, tricked, hurt, and defend, and taken, not even realizing, to defend individually grouped and together, like what is now manifest as suits and ties, encounters, for example, involved with culture, where nuclear weapons, where even machine guns, even, knives and swords and spears, weapons, anything, let alone. And in other words, while we're in this base that we know was forced since before our founders were born, but here and there, sickly distinctly, this breaching method knew that our country's identities of law would have to use phrases like criminally foreign influenced and like criminally and insidiousness. And they knew that they would have to blame it on other things, others, ourselves, and defend that wrongly. And they knew that they could measure, maintain, and propagate defenses of that as defenses and as styles of fact-keeping nature, logic nature, qualities of logic, aspects of logic, natures of logic that couldn't be defended and afford simultaneously the revelations that come from people using short words properly. And so they have conditioned collusion /S, where use, singular, is the subject. But that being the subject, its method juxtaposed what it propagated, self-cultivated. This not only divided Native Americans from Native Americans, it employed all descriptions of it. It employed effectively uses of phrases like divide and conquer, tactically juxtaposed with tactical physical delusions, identity delusions, and nature delusions. For example, regarding the nature that the Constitution unabridged is, and regarding the value of exceptions and of exception nature. For example, where and how interbranch has the right to lie or doesn't, and where and how. In other words, these are certain types of victims because that's a measured identity in defense of it. This thing was, this roles with this breaching method had possession of the colonies, how grouped too. That's recorded in the recorded still, self-valued since before cars were invented, with slavery north and south. And I learned in notes as additional content with at Central Connecticut State University, there was oh, that's my train of thought. But it's regarding the laws, where it was against the law to speak about these things, unless it was in the crazy context where the countries work together. Worse than extorted. See, these are roles with families that you have to describe how they use each agent and fact-keeping nature of them and of areas, overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Inclusion also with recorded relevant, hyper-additionally relevant insidiousness of people's positive, negative / negative identity treatments, because it's with that. There's a trinity there. There's the cell body, the cell nucleus, the cell wall. We were taught this. We could observe this with plants. This is a trinity. We know that this is a body of value with air, with more than just air, gases, and water, and elements. In other words, the hyper invisible is in demonstration to us. See, if this was like mapped out speech, because this is also programming. You can make all kinds of programs. And Little Rap Guy and Friends. So I'm telling you, so why would you make a video? Why wouldn't you just share? In other words, the only way we think we could, in other words, I could just sit here and stack ways to change the nature of what excuses real are standing, because you could discern them because nature itself, hyper nature itself can be discerned. The science reveals it needs. This is the hyper nature theory and theorem. This is also the especial relativity theory and theorem. The special relativity theory has to do with Earth's special difference. Therefore, with where and how and why. These are distinct identities of volume, where volume equals value as nature / nature as value. And where and how functional it is that and how. The identity, the value, and with the value of the identity are the hyper-simultaneous. For example, as that which was being exploited as the human fact-checking nature breaching method that we know true all ways, not denying any exceptions and/or the value of exceptions, and not valuing them being or having been denied with logic. We know that there was a breaching method that replaced and made them forget what they had remembered. There are no worms in the soil any longer around me. And I'm sure a lot of places, if not everywhere. In other words, they used to walk into the puddles all the time. And we used to be able to fold back the soil, put a shovel in the ground, fold back the grass, look in there, there's worms. Anytime. You do that and then you put it down. It's no longer like that. They used to walk into the bodies of water. No longer there. You know, this measured and maintained tactically denatured the suburbs, let alone what the breaching method only afforded, capable of unfolding identities of damage control as collusion /S too, with that unfathomed. So this is also relevant to where and how there are means to discern this. Using the hyperscope of the ancient snow people. You could draw the ancient snow people. You could imagine the ancient snow people 3+ symbols, 3 addition symbols with two parentheses on both sides of it. And you stack them, 3. And where and how they don't break stacked. And they're all positive. This is what I call algebraic consciousness / consciousness algebraic. And this is where nature is value / value as nature. As, for example, as the identity that is right to left, while distinctly being itself, as you are, being yourself, left to right and right to left, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper-simultaneously and relevant to Earth's a special difference, as Earth's a special difference. See, it will only stay positive onto all parts of itself as space / existence, where and how hyper additionally from greater than this, and while as more finite and with increasingly volume where value is nature, in other words, it never mixed because it was too finite to come with what is where and how the finite, the grouped, and all together are bound. And how really, see, but the identity that is hyper native pure, that and how the tactically denatured ground and the value of it and the significance of it is denied. And for example, this is where and how too simultaneously it is so valuable that with that and how we have all black pupils and whites of eyes. All we have to do is have examined, overt / insidious motivations, that no one fathomed, because everyone came through, not just, each age of fact-cheaping nature, each identity of the ground location, having been already employed to where and how the sustained part was used to keep all kinds of unconnected things and victim reactions, non-reactions, or they changed the person to fake words and things like that anyway. If people tell lies, it's relevant to this. Other is used in value, where short words are told, and where the right ones have revelations that are also means to discern where and how certain type of victim / hyper victim, is private, interbranch private, like business, things like that. and then hyper-private, where and how they have temporary and differential roles as the same identity together. There are names associated with Sandy Hook and with courts supposed to be against such things. You see, boxing, certain type of victims that people A through Z were and are employed as a race in our countries, individually grouped in together, where and how they speak for names, it is increasingly no longer capable of affording the short words and logic being led by the relevance of where and how, being an individual, being grouped simultaneously, and being a species body of volume. Those are three distinct identities of volume, where value equals nature as value / value as nature, as three distinctly bound identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. So the two / sequence / simultaneous nature. There are 5 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. And this comes to what is hyper variable, and or is hyper constant. And this comes to possession, uses, this comes to employment of breaching method possessions, possession singular, of the sciences that no one fathomed, as a certain type of victim / hyper victim, and or they change people's words attached to the fake words to keep. For example, when they have instances of all different natures every day, interbranch. This breaching method had already employed all the. I lost my train of thought. Boxing is taught. But in other words, we have these problems in our country sickly distinctly. And there is a means to demonstrate that and how sickly non-distinctly has only not been overcome because we have not discerned it. And because we have not discerned it, it effectively kept employed. Uses of self-value collusions, where and how, for example, people speak about emotions. Sickly distinctly, people A through Z, identity the ground stewards, even interbranch, A through Z. They tell lies, hide lies, and have various natures of delusions. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a police form, I'm not a criminal. These doctors are recorded originally and still. There are more people and things against individuals too than there are streets in Hartford that individuals associated with where and how interbranch and foreign have shared roles on off campuses like of all ages and natures sickly distinctly, and where and how that has relevance to answer /s to all answers regarding the real causes of negative value nature regressions, acts, and natures. And recorded uses of statistical locations. Like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles with a whole bunch of people directly and indirectly on off Wethersfield, Connecticut elections locations, with people from both political parties, with mayors on off parks in Wethersfield and Hartford, with judges involved also with uses of other locations as things people can't make things up about. But so they make confessions and demonstrations relevant to where and how people communicate other than they say. Where and how. And they communicate that and how they're in a pretend other. Relevant as answer to the questions like, for example, how could people deny the significance of how little kids could say beyond opinion that now the course of Black pupils / white divides are bridged, and uses of it by others distinctly from of the three branches of government, which we'll examine too, and the exceptions and exception nature tied to them. There are roles with this method that forbids proper reception of the finite and or of sequence, because roles with that are forced and sickly distinctly, not just relevant to the obvious, because the obvious was employed first, and through all the other employments of it, and roles with it only, as human memory and as human awareness and as in human anticipation. So there are three types of data must have to do with this. But there are means to show how the sciences stewards individually grouped and together are animate, where and how the hyper-animate is effectively being and having been maintained between campuses of each age and nature. For example, also you see I'm calmer here. People make statements. People say, about when other people keep speaking, especially if you put lists or things like that online, because why people do it is because people observe in others what nature is demonstrating, which is everyone forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to self-value, where and how a breaching method and effectively employed use of all locations, the same way computers work. And this is with time treatments. And this is with value treatments. And this is with exceptions and exception nature. Because The identity, when you're speaking about identity, you're speaking about an identity of relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. And note how value has a relativity to positive and negative and or to neutrality simultaneously. So we don't have to agree about the name of the hyper-simultaneous, but it is a scientific value that we have to agree on. And where exceptions in exception nature say we have to agree about the name or not, for political reasons forced by the breaching method, note first, then while that described to us as what is scientific or practical. I meant to say scientific or practical to convict or to theorize regarding the ancients, the colonial times, the semi-ancients. They left out and leave out roles with the databases and the relevance of that, where and how sickly distinctly roles with the breaching method were our, in other words, we know that which conceived. It conceived tactically denatured identity of the ground locations, because as Earth's identity of relationship to itself with its special difference only as temporary positive now. With that special difference denied, it is not temporary / lasting positive that is also positive onto the self as itself, as the subject, and where the relevance of that is. Again, it is the hypergenesis of all things finite, active, and progressive, where value is nature / nature is value. And for example, the value of truth, seek the value of what really sequentially, the value of the significance of sequence shifts and or uses of the motivations. See, they have programs mixed with programs with each age. They have employed formal fact sheet in nature, self-value, only simultaneously self-value what they don't like people going crazy to protest, or people not protesting, or people, because the sequence shifts aren't being countered. Offensively, the quality of fact sheet nature that is reliant qualities of styles of fact sheet nature, names, treatments, sequence, like the value of sequence. Right in the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, in New York, right before the World Trade Center attack. Leading up to that, and then the night before it, where I roll outside the court and outside the World Trade Center, where I rolls with names on off the World Trade Center and on off the Ninth Circuit, with proven post-dated documents had been presented to the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, which is right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before they were taken out. This breaching method effectively maintains where and how. If you try to treat and use the names properly as victims, they will maintain collusion /S with where and how effectively more things are leveraged against the people, that there are also more street things than there are streets in each city, each town, let alone. Specifically to keep it blamed on other things other than ourselves, sickly distinctly. Where and how it knew the value of itself. That self which we can't be, but to an extent we are. To know that the Constitution is abridged. It was left abridged. See, but this is replaced by like magic tricks, where how the sciences really came to being abridged, and to getting away with defending that while simultaneously unfolding and having unfolded is and has been overt criminal enterprises. That means criminal insidiousness natures like wrongdoing itself, and private ones originally and still. They were incapable of affording the short words and revelations in the value of them. For example, worms are no longer walking into the puddles or into the bodies of water, which are no longer existing. And there is a landscape theater or a syntactical theater, where there's it was more like puddles, what they call ponds. One thing that could make online, internet companies, all of them could use, especially YouTube, I think, is if we had a button that would store our, links. So if I come across a video and I see, if I can't find the link for the video I saw one time of a guy, so it makes I can't cite my sources. So we could cite our sources properly. We could press a button and it would do it. And I could make also something to make that increasingly valuable for you to do it. Because we have the phenomenon we never had before, to where we can communicate with other countries, even if we don't speak and we know we're in a semi-ancient trap, and we know, as standing formal treatments of value and defenses of them are simultaneously defenses of practical, of defenses of uses of phrase and or of the nature of practical reason. that can't be defended as forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to. And or they're going to attach that person to fake words, fake locations, and or exploit that being and having been done, which is one of the ways they get away with in keeping rolls with this. Differentially, because no one wants rolls with it, but it's differentially increasingly because it is exploited where and how no one fathomed it would exploit people in coordinated ways and be able to get away with it on and off campuses of each age and nature, individually grouped and together too, and all exceptions in exception nature too. And then further relative to where and to how really everything and why and how government is manifest. I taught best boxings. I teach us things. The species body longs to shadow box some rest. I taught best. The strongest power / might we could be if every single person on the planet agrees to do the same plan. It's still not going to be right unless we're being led by how it is functional, where and how it is hyper invisible but still discernible. That which is in inseparable conjunction to all parts of grammar individually grouped and together, and of every language that way. Humanity pray. Because the languages also were revealed by the ancients of attendance to this order of orders that it forged all natures of order / disorder effectively as arrays and or as lists. Use the same exact way programs use arrays and lists. And the phenomena of being able to have memory over temporary positive or negative, relative. No, to the value of sequence, truth. So it is recorded. For example, one of the things forgiveness science failed to reveal is the answer for where people would say that forgiveness is part of religion. It's so the person could tell on the people telling on everyone. Also, as criminal roles with everyone, kept with their worst patients and criminals, needed to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, progressive lies. Doing whatever, saying whatever, and or self-valuing that being having been done for other reasons. Per uses of what is actually recorded. And this is also uses of people's motivations, narratives. This is forcing us to use or to not use each other's names. Or in other words, where they're forging names and switching names interbranch as part of the means to discern their collusions timed with areas of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, recorded timed uses of sense and sensibilities towards where known and unknown. We have a whole bunch of different countries here shared on and off campuses. Now, really shared on and off campuses. There's Mr. Apuzzi. I never had a conversation with my life. They made one a fake exception to make it appear other. That was not. It was in demonstration of the same thing. Now they have the generations of that family needed to hide sequence shifts with O'Brien's and with others with the police families on and off Sandy Hook and Newtown, Connecticut, on and off campuses, further on off principal child abusers campus. Since before that was caught, it was recorded how it was forced. They prevent people short words. They attach people to fake words. They influence people at roles with phones and their family members to attach people to fake words, change words, whole faked audio and video transcripts. Now, they also have roles with emails with this, which and where and how they've been using the interbranch Facebook pages and the campus Facebook pages, because it's recorded where and how they have intercampuses through time, individually grouped and together. One part of what seems complicated, just like it would just take time to explain the rules of English grammar. Word salad, gobbledygook, and things like that. They're having people trained, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to say about those around them because of the method, effectively, that kept and keeps campuses of each age and nature, intercities, being and having been used by on off Central Connecticut State University, on off Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. A whole bunch of people directly and indirectly associated with federal criminals and various natures of organized crime and of natures of crime, body dumping spots, real and or if made up, all or some of them, because there's a group of them, they all have ties to it. The people also timed uses of the names next to campuses, hiding live progressions that all go back to uses of people involved also. So this employed natures of positive and negative treatments. Which wherever there's a positive or negative treatment, there's an identity treatment relative to where and how the hyper invisible, but still discernible, is relative to mind's value. As mind's value, where we are like a part of our body, is to our complete identity, to the hyper simultaneous, as that which is distinct from while being the value of being an individual as volume, distinctly from being grouped, and distinctly from being species body of volume. Boxing, one way. Boxing, martial arts, and the wrestling, they share an identity. Where and how, like the notes of music, they share an identity. Where and how the government, it shares an identity, individually grouped and together. It shares an identity grouped. And that identity involved all private tied to them. There's a prison in Sandy Hook, Newtown, who recorded had crimes and physical delusions differentially relevant with their patients and criminals since before they got caught, and where and how their logic has qualities, aspects, in nature, and has databases and names ties to the same house slash S through time, and involved with the names as roles with timed predicate acts on and off the campuses. They also effectively have uses of the identity ground, locations, names by victims forced, where and how effective employments of victim predator slash hyper victim predators are relevant, where and how they are formal, informal. Like, for example, with the where and how the course of blacks of pupils, whites of eyes, and the value of the means of the relevant, the increasing value of it to logic. So, for example, the Institute of Living was founded on the campus of Hartford Hospital in 1822, with slavery still entrenched, north and south, because the breaching method had that one of a whole bunch of stacked means by a singular breaching method against human fact-driven nature. And I could refer to it as nature because where identity is a complete volume, again, we're going by where and how we are its volume, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that relevant to where and how we could make exceptions. In other words, we could be systems other than its own that deny the relevance of its conjunction to, and as the relevance of complete possession over all parts of human fact-driven nature, individually grouped in together. It has needs for us to use words like value. It has needs for us to use nature, like for example, where how nature as identity's volume science. See, there are doctors, there's a Leahy family that pretended conversations with me, who has roles with a whole bunch of people like a former Mayor Gold, who's been involved with and a principal child abuser, and more people involved with uses of various natures of abuses of elderly and of children being and having been simultaneous and hyper simultaneous where that is relevant needed where the logic is recorded being and having been affected by the breaching method, and where and how the relevance of that is playing out at the child campuses, and that where and how they have chemical crimes against the kids. They have military families involved with Hartford Hospital. And these are also people on and off the state judicial branch offices involved with names at the locations next to it, like a Fianza family, who also confirmed roles with as others did, with people, with judges and prosecutors and people with the military on and off Elm Street and Rocky Hill and Weathersfield involved with identity theft, fraud, database crimes, with roles, where and how they make us use their names because they want to lie about our motivations and want to lie about their motivations. They need to hide they already did that in the background in cases. And they've been doing this to keep people from mouth shut about where and how, really why. The order of the finite and the value of it being forbid distinctly from where and how order is distinct. active and or grouped, and additionally where and how relevant is value to come. Again, and not leaving out where and how the ground, we are hyper-additionally ground, and ground is hyper-additionally us, where and how both the ground and us are not the identity of the simultaneous nature, but to an extent, distinctly we are. This goes with demonstration of how we are hyper-additional nature, to where and how more of that hyper constant is being made by and through the temporary / lasting, and all these things individually grouped and together generated. So we must value the order of sequence truth and the value of it with logic. Because before we come to where it is overtly / insidiously means to discern criminal insidiousness as a nature of theater, positive and negative treatments, and identity, therefore names treatments at all locations, areas, and states when people bring up color, when people bring up what is clear. It is only leaving out and unaware of, everyone's kept, in other words, Central Connecticut State University, it's not, every campus is a great positive / hyper positive. From all campuses, good people are maintained, roll self-value with evil by saying things that they can't go back and afford discerned later per relevant uses of nature itself as criminal insidious nature, effectively propagated. I am not a lawyer, not a police foreman, not a judge. No, this is about reading the Constitution on a bridge. This is about the relevance of witch trials, the value of the relevance of witch trials, even if made up. Even if our founders, for some crazy reason, had to make it up for legitimate reasons, they had to hide their roles because the breaching method was still entrenched. That's how slavery stayed entrenched. And it never got countered because the slavery is distinctly against everyone, to keep how non-distinctly from being discerned. Until that's discerned, till one voice can speak through. In other words, the identity theft, fraud, slanders, cover-ups. This is maintained. How motivated, the certain type of predicate acts methods roles that blames other things, others, themselves wrongly, and self-cultivates that by self-evaluating when how slavery was. No one wanted that. No one wants that. So one thing we could do is use a definition of pantheism that is about the hyper simultaneous, and that is aware of that and how the suits and ties, the counters that are speaking for positive and negative. They can't defend their short words and afford not to self-value. Where and how the short words of individuals could be forbid. The proper nature too, per all kinds of values relevant, being denied at locations. They have employed effectively the arrays of great school to not good school. Effectively self-value, uses in the logic and in the nature of people. Where and how arrays are being and having been employed by the breaching method, which is discernibly relevant where and how they have employed. Sense and sensibilities, Jane Austen's phrase again, regarding color, is effectively, you have to, computers have to mimic what the breaching method was doing. To explain what the breaching method was doing, you have to explain what computers do. You have to use short words, real fast, properly. So computers have memory of positive or negative, and the relevant to it of it to its identities, treatments as assigned, and the volume of things individually grouped in together. Further being bound by the value of sequence true, before the order of anything finite now, before the order of finite, before the smallest finite detail treatment made to and as each modern country's name. There had already been a complete possession over all kinds of aspects and natures of all identity, ground locations, areas and states, human fact, treatment, nature, conjunctions, being and having been more demonstrably separated from the science that is generating all other ones. And so, and for example, when you bring up slavery, you bring up identity of relativity to the sciences, individually grouped it together. Has relativity to and value, where people would they call debate if math is more important than English, or than, geometry, or what type of math is algebra more. Well, that's all connected but they have that order of it. But this is where the sciences have been abridged. They have the time treatments, and their defenses have them left out where and how relevant are where and how the areas of overt criminal enterprises or private ones, hundreds of nations shared on off all locations as roles relevant to where and how. Knave is knave. Well, you have those people stacking in New York City. Where's the little girl? She's gonna go. Well, little girl, she's gonna go walk out, and where to what? And what age is she? She get to come where she lives on the 10th floor, say, of a New York part, city, or any city. So even if it's a short building, exceptions. You know what I mean? She walks out. Where there are overt evidences of a breaching method having influenced humanity's identity of the ground, identity of relationship to itself. And it was simultaneously, consciously aware of roles and nature's off the record that it was showing. It has to hide lipoaggressions because it is being and having been used at other locations where and how the database illusion stacking is relevant to where and how they got away with this, denying the significance of value of having black pupils and white survive. For example, where and how racism is brought up and the counters to them stay in collusion with each other and not even realizing. And, in other words, it's not independence or unity alone. It's about the hyper simultaneous, its system. It's what's really going to cause positive value nature, progressions, acts, natures, evolutions, fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. So, in other words, this can also be used to monetize people that don't have a lot of subscribers. We can, in other words, can make a website. I'll donate the idea. So, and it can be operated by. The operations of it can be defended by the interbranch or anybody. No, to keep it. In other words, what is it? Just you make the front end design is simple. In other words, where and how the finite details interbranch has been using their roles with the sense and sensibilities of the owners of the platforms and of their differences between each other to hide where and how they've been exploiting difference, because them doing that and having done that is also being and having been used remotely. It knew they were going to do that. I don't know this Perone family. They pretended to know me 3 times. In other words, for example, too, as one of the examples of one of the people's names involved with a former Mayor Gold and some other mayor, I don't know. I forgot the name of them. A Fianza family brought it up with confessions regarding spots next to the World Trade Center. I mean, next to the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut and next to Elm Street and Route 3 and at spots next in names involved on off 2 Route Highway with interbranch, also at spots next to news media like WFSB and spots and names associated on and off Fox Connecticut News also, and at spots on and off WTNH. And in the Spotter family, in other words, I know you guys are victims because other people brought your names up just like they brought your names up with me and the class placements. And they have your mother and they have people's families members. And so this is relevant to and this Chet Casper, I never had a class with him in my life. I don't know. These are people that went to my grammar school and people I never saw on my middle school who were pretending who had others pretend other for them, and or imply other and where and how that's relevant. Because in other words, these are also people involved with schools keeping standing positions and roles with not off schools. This has everything from names at spots next to body dumping spots, which I'm sure had nothing to do with those murders. but roles, self-valuing, leaving out details, and names uses that good or bad, for good or bad, or leaving them out is involved, and or they just change people's words. So they have police forms like with the names Demoro and Scalora involved with military, foreign, and domestic families, private, associated with interbranch too. They have also been attaching people to fake investigators, and campuses themselves. The campuses that train them are being and haven't been used remotely as roles with predicate acts that effectively are used effectively to maintain that type of victim, predator / hyper victim, predator that could blame other things, others or ourselves, while denying use of the value of how the course of black pupils, white survivors, and hyper native is abridged. Especially if we're not Native American, it is easier to discern that way, as it is easier to discern other ways being Native American. There is a breaching method upon each being. It's all Native dreams. Teach things. I need the link to the Native American. Please, YouTube, put, or someone suggest to YouTube to put the thing, a button. So, okay, I'm going to use this. I need to remember this video. I mean, and a button, so especially Facebook needs it. When the police forms and or the courts and or the political families and or the private and or the forming differentially too, because differentially increasing. This is what one of the things that is the answer to where and how people would self-value roles with some sick things like that, those crazy laws against everybody. So that's what our movie should be about, where we make this hyper theater. Hyper theater can't counter and can't be offense, but it is everything. The simultaneous. But people can't stand a list of things used to discern an identity of simultaneous and the relevance of it to logic, distinctly and non-distinctly, as is the value of what really sequentially happened, truth, and the value of that. A breaching method was sustained against the Native Americans. While it was sustaining that, it was consciously maintaining worse than just blamed on other things, others, and or on selves. And with physical delusions, identity delusions, and nature delusions. So when people make treatments about the environment, it's a good example of victim properly trying to describe it and defending those descriptions as victim predator, while distinctly as a victim hyper predator. Because you have to remember, with and two motivations in defenses of positive and negative treatments, detailed treatments, the value of detailed treatments ignored, the significance of it. These words are offensively denied speech. So they have roles with names at corners of streets, involved with exceptions, with methods that make mixture of people that don't never even communicated at all, effectively kept needing to be sense and sensibilities, needing to hide how they left and leave out details, where and how the overt areas, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the city, interbranch and insidiousness of people A through Z, and exceptions, exception nature tied to them, like military databases, too, like their roles with the materials they use, like the various natures of drugs and things like that, and for their relevance of roles with this Leahy family with a whole bunch of people interstates, criminally foreign influence leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. Further with crimes with people with the Wethersfield police and other police departments associated with them, also with the same house. /S involved with the names coordinated, where and how they have relevant falsified police reports, and they stack arrays of fake police reports into the databases and do it in ways so if you respond to one of them, it leaves out all the confessions, or you have to, communicate it. Where and how roles with fake things being said and communicated are being and have been stacked into branch locations, sickly distinctly from the other countries doing it against their own too, individually grouped and together. Russians against Russians, Americans against Americans. And even regardless, and then they made people that get killed by each other. And their family members, they associate, they're killing each other. Because they're the logic of the breaching method. Look below your feet. Before our founders were born, the suburbs were tactically denatured. How could someone make a subject treatment about girls' rights or women's rights? You don't bring out how that little girl has to walk from the wet floor, even if it's a little small building, onto a city street. You blame it on the other thing. You blame it on the kids, on gangs you charge wrong, because they wouldn't be in the gang had there not been juxtaposed natures of organized crime and fact cheaping nature oriented and identity oriented predicate acts, methods, roles, and natures relevant on off the campuses, therefore on off subjects treatments, and for on off nature treatments that needs to pretend other, where and how that was effectively employed as things are, individually grouped in together. Tactically, effectively to have nature demonstrate what no one could afford demonstrated, where and how it knew that nature would continually demonstrate the value it needs for us to discern the breaching methods and as a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, and as means to discern that nature of criminal insidiousness and relevant to motivations treatments, tactically failed in having been failed. And so while being failed, valuing having been failed, no. I self-promote boxing. I'll build the wall. YouTube.com/user/Romulus Wall. This is Romulus and Remus Science. Republics. Lost. The Constitution abridged. Boxing. Not one has sledged. Fake branches stand, but shown themselves will then step down and let them fall. And there is seed, and seed alone, as nature's seed builds nature's wall. The species' body longs to train, attend. Shadow box some rest, some even say boxing. The wind loves shadow boxing. Okay, so this I left the means out. The means I left out because I forgot what was the subject I was, and I remember now. It was about the special relativity theory and theorem. Earth's special relativity is forced from here because we have, no matter how, regardless of the motivations, it's a part of that too. The proofs of denial of things, denial of how they got away with denial formally of the significance of the value of the only increasing value of means of means with discernment by how we have black pupils and whites of eyes, by where and how only criminal and serious nature positive treatments or negative treatments have stayed collusions against the proper positive and negative treatments, and where there are distinct identities of positive, individually grouped and together. Individually as 5 identities of sequence nature, simultaneously as we are. And as exception, nature, and demonstration of the same thing. So, where an exception, nature is formally denied, informally being and having been effectively employed, individually grouped in together countries, and self-denied as the only identities of sophistication, tactically ulterior from that hyper-native sophistication. American history begins with explaining about how the memory of the ancient republic was taken from the people of the world sickly distinctly. And that was sustained because it was originally before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced, that they had been led by what itself, as itself demonstrates, is the real way to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And the difference, the real difference of causing positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures that are criminal and serious natures of positives. The suburbs were tactically denatured to cause criminal and serious natures of positive treatments as means to survive against or to try to overcome the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that no one caused, but the breaching method caused it. The breaching method not only used Native Americans remotely from other countries because it took away their means. It used the colonists, it used the array, the fake sides. Even if blaming colonization, because colonization itself, individually grouped and together, is the complete possession of the hyper-sophistication of a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise as an identity of conjunction to that, and as an identity of criminal insidiousness, as an identity of theater, that way, and so relevant to where and to how we gather here, who really Force means by this hyperscope, this way of mind, its own, not left abridged. We will examine many natures of organized. Now, if you're involved in a whole bunch of natures of organized crime, actually, if you're a colonial court, you know, let alone one, you know, those things, they employ fact-human nature that cannot defend its logic treatments, its bullying treatments. Doesn't even realize how to make hyper-algebraic treatments. So hyper-algebraic consciousness / consciousness algebraic is run functionally by how functional, by the phenomenon of how functional it is. That and how the identity of the hyper-simultaneous defined that way is increasing value that is increasingly positive to itself, as opposed to opposed to a temporary positive state of itself that is identity of relationship to itself that causes forced space nature value transfer, length of Hadis. That doesn't mean it kills us. Everyone dies, in other words, what's positive heaven and hell were revealed by this science method that uses the phenomenon of how the order of the finite is distinct from the order of what is active, is distinct from the order of what value to come, is distinct from the value of truth that came before this. And so we have had trained certain type of victim / hyper victim to speak about order as one thing, as identity of the ground locations, uses, distinctly from all others, but everyone having missed how non-distinctly that too having been used remotely. So this effectively recorded how it keeps complete strangers, including the members of the interbranches and all exceptions and exception nature used to defend what can't defend itself in a fort. Logic in nature that can't defend itself in a fort. The short words and revelations that come from, like when I say, our founders had to hide their roles, getting the Constitution, even to the extent it was gotten where they said to get the Constitution unabridged. They knew that. The breaching method knew that they would have to hide their roles. They wouldn't be able to speak out about what was entrenched north and south as subject treatments as they wanted and needed them presented, like slavery. Because defenses of that would be in state logic that could not defend themselves and afford counters to where into how the courts too, with people A through Z. They had no identity. But we're speaking as if one's showing one through contrast. criminal and ceaseless natures of correlation. By the value of torture. Now, this is one of the things that the torture, that's one of the torture methods they employ against any individual who's going to use the revelations. So how it comes is that we know Native Americans were hurt by a breaching method we don't want naturally anything to do with, but it already came. And we know that we want them to have, the identity, the grounds, the identity of relationship to itself and impositions upon it, actually addressed by our actual means and longing as our actual hyper-native. And where and how. We shouldn't have to debate that and how. The hypernatural, even, there's a need to discern it distinctly from that called natural by the law. This needs to speak about environment because it's in a criminal insidious nature greater than more finite than the positive negative logic identity, logic treatments. One of the things we could do is set up a way to make it. There's a bunch of ways you could make it self-valued. People will be glad to help absorb the entire population, and not in a crazy way. Like it should feel like games going to be evolving better than what we have citizens that do have homes in. Because while we're addressing the extent, to the extent we could get it equal, where we get a base to claim a bottom. But right now it's below bottom, or we're claiming wrong. As claims, if you're going to try to claim that the Constitution is unabridged. The Constitution was left abridged, rolls with it as rolls with identities of the ground locations were employed as roles in natures where and how we are fact-human nature-oriented manifest. At best, boxing. So this is a fact-human nature-oriented breaching method against everyone sickly distinctly. To counter how non-distinctly. Rather than self-valuing how that was exploited, which we could do properly, everyone self-values the way the breaching method needs everyone to. Evolution science only feels like games. That's where we should sense that. Then we can start going real fast, and I'll just keep, and everyone will start figuring out how to do this. In other words, we'll just stack means to make it so there's at least temporary, as much time as possible, that we know no nuclear weapons, no wars are going to go off anywhere. So we just do this problem, one solution. If you're going to have one solution, it has to be led by that one hyper-native identity. See, the problem with native dreams is only a problem one way. What they long to speak is too big. It's too finite. than what is afforded speech. And that's each. But see, it's relevant to discern the breaching method, to discern how distinctly they, by every other identity of the human species bodies, difference slash S, had and effectively have those differences employed. So, Central Connecticut State University has voices that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed through communications, other than they communicated they wouldn't do pretend. And how, in other words, and also this was these on other campuses, intercities, and with people also on off Trinity College, also having been collusions with this, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context, and since as Connecticut's roles with relevant intercities instances, and where and how relevant is where and how they've been getting away, would juxtapose distinct natures of abuses of each age simultaneously, and relevant as recorded timed uses of locations. That shows also the influences of that breaching method relevant. Now, denied, and how denied the relevance of itself as a value, where and how there were questions, and where and how there were subjects treatments, leaving it out, the breaching method. And while simultaneously doing themselves or have self-value, others having been blaming on other things, others ourselves, the real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Exactly, wrongly, even when correctly, the way the breaching method wanted and needs. So, the same reason the Native Americans hurt the Native Americans and the colonists hurt the Native is the reason the colonists hurt the Native Americans. They've been separated from the hyper-native education when before sciences became criminally foreign influenced. Nature itself demonstrated why and how we could discern its identity of volume, being hyper invisible, but still discernible. But this requires uses of, lists and of uses of names to speak about the simultaneous, and uses of finite and the order of the finite, means and needs to speak about the denials of it and the needs for it, and the motivations narratives, because the breaching method increasingly needs others to lie to everyone for all kinds of different motivations, natures, needs, interests apparent, even real mixed, even when real, though. There are additional motivations that no one wanted, but it's increasingly effective. The breaching method that our founders left us to demonstrate. So they've been changing. Our countries have sickly distinctly together. Russians and Americans confess, demonstrate, record, they change what people say to conspiracy theories. And they totally fake conversations with their experts and with themselves, fabricating audio and video transcripts, arrays of fake falsified police reports into databases. relevant to the hierarchy and to the lower hierarchy of the FBI. 2, differentially criminally forward influence. This knew that identities of law would speak for the identities of law as if they were free or their own identity before they were. This breaching method was sophistication here. Before these, I caught as the agencies, worse than criminally incompetent. Rolls with all kinds of offensive predicate acts more than there are streets in your towns with singular names. Hartford. So please, someone from Hartford, Connecticut, someone from New York City, someone from New Britain, someone from Wethersfield, Connecticut. We're going to address interbrand switching names. I've been trying to get writing since I was a kid, but they tell you not to say stuff at the same time. They've been exploiting that by sticking fake things. They've been affecting arrests of people to hide what came before that, and as their roles to keep people self-valuable. They put little tricks. They do crimes, pretend other people did it, make fake exceptions. In other words, through time, these are people involved with uses of spots next to campuses and next to parks and names associated with corners of streets. This is uses of locations where and how identity is being and having been exploited. Where and how identity are 5 bound, distinct identities of truth not used as a lie. Truth not valued used by lies or having been used by lies by others, which is also relevant. Again, because of that identity that is only increasing value as the identity of the higher simultaneous with that which has already been. And as this we are, that is being, and while being valued to come here now. Fake branches bow and fall. Step back down away from them, y'all. So, in other words, we need to address, I tell it best, how they use, even they have criminally forward influence uses of the Darth Vader and the Force theme. So these are distinct identities of Force, while not the Force. Vaccines. One thing is surging through all things alone. So this is also where and how they've been adapting through time and how really came to manifest. How now it is manifest, they have on-campus police forms. And then they have off-campus, right off-campus police stations at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, which is also relevant to where and to how they have roles, these locations, with slavery. And so they still have roles with natures of identity thefts and frauds, timed on and off these campuses, intercities through time connected to, and uses of that at other locations relevant. And that was involved and is involved with led up to the World Trade Center and since. And recorded means to observe how all that was for their time treatments, their value of time treatments, the value of details treatments, significance of it. Keep fighting wars in the name of America. Keep having people die. Keep getting away with it by saying things to force fake fact-cheating nature, quality of fact-cheating nature. It's not just that you have human lives sacrificed for intellectual incompetence, protecting others simultaneously. It's not just that and how that is used remotely. This knew that countries' names would have to use, states' names would have to use, everyone would have to use to speak properly. Words, phrases like criminal insidiousness, phrases like criminally foreign influence. And it knew that it would have to blame on other identities to defend. Uses of that reaction. Because where and how you cannot not have a reaction relevant to, say, even if they made it up, fentanyl, which I'm sure they didn't make it up, people are dying. There are recorded more methods, consciously recorded, of things way worse than they put people in jails for all the time. Leveraged against the people of Hartford than there are streets in Hartford. That's not by accident. And this was designed. So the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has a lawyer, Robert Chevrolet, who's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with various natures of federal evidence as crimes, with child sex offenders, and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with a whole bunch of people tied to a Joseph Aiello and to mayors, and to a Christopher Collin. People that are involved with judges and people planting evidences, sequence shifts, identity thefts and frauds with a former Mayor Gold's family, and the relevance of it, which was conversations they brought up on my street, and with fake news, put me in fake conversations. There's a Roger Suzanin who's involved with some judges and prosecutors on off Elm Streets in Rocky Hill and Weathersfield, and then their conjunctions with Route 3, intercities, and on off campuses, further with a child abuser, and more people with the FBI and the police chief Cintron and his daughter, demonstrated by the confessions of Weathersfield police, also forging and switching names, and by a Jonathan Mayano, also on off locations, and with his confessions that brought up the principal child daughter's name, his confessions, also who brought up the Moros, who are also involved. And I never saw John Mayano at my campus in grammar school in my life, and I never saw him all the way up until I heard his name. And then after the people that were in my grade that came on my street, these are people, the Weathersfield police are playing games with their phones, with switching names. It sounds like, in other words. So also a Bob Chase with the forensics locations. There are a whole bunch of ties to a Connecticut forensics locations that has a recorded pattern of federal crimes, with evidences with their patients and criminals since before they got caught through time. And then there were timed uses of that as their roles with the predicate acts against me, including with the news media. So the interbranch has been preventing me any writing to respond to, and the news media that has been pretending I don't say things clear too. As people, while simultaneously fabricating audio and video, fake emails because they wanted to hide how the communications had been over, and in response to a whole bunch of different confessions and statements and things that a since proven principal child abuser made on our answer machine. They hid that by telling WTNH to pretend it was email crimes. Pretend I sent emails with communications with the school, and they made up things with some of the parents because some of the parents and people that they have names next to the schools have roles with medical locations, with mental health, and with psychiatry that are involved with drugs, crimes that are medical, and with overt gangs, drugs, overt criminal enterprises with the locations, areas. They have crimes with juries selection. They have crimes with various natures of courts, judges, and prosecutors. Now, these people that had that employed to exploit that other locations. So there are houses on and off Two Rod Highway involved. There's a colonial house. There's one of the ones involved with a Phil Colo. Then a Bob Chase confessed as one of the ones involved. Now there are two Mendez police brothers recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved, fabricating audio and video and conversations with me on and off the Wethersfield police station and on and off in the Britain Superior Court. Also, their roles on and off the spots next to the state capitol involved with identity theft, fraudulent with them through time. Roles with various natures and methods of wire crimes relevant, and people involved with KKK themed, Black themed, and Latino themed military police families and uses of them, and police forms associated with the prisons. So apparently, the Central Connecticut State University has people that trains people that go with the prisons in the military and the state police, and those campuses names are having been employed needing to hide light progressions preemptively, actively, and increasingly. And there is remote uses of that at other locations. And that is where and how it is effectively maintained, where all kind of naive responses, non-responses, and or worse exists. Again, relevant to where and to how. It's taken so long to use all the ways having black people's rights of eyes and knowing that breaching against the Native Americans and everyone's self simultaneous. How our means, in other words, our means were way greater than the suburbs as designed, let alone New York City. See, this breaching method put then, now, it did now, in fact, it knew now there would be a little girl. No, in other words, if you're thinking about mind, soul, honestly, identity, honestly, of America, you don't pretend you don't realize that there are girls that could only walk out onto, girls or boys, little kids. What was a trap so long, it's got each age sickly distinctly, effectively employed, blaming other things, others themselves wrongly, even when correctly. Exactly the way wrongly it needs, though, because defenses of it can't afford itself, and the nature of logic and short words necessary to be able to counter and overcome that nature of criminal insidiousness that hurts everyone, each location, area, and state. We're really kept and keeps more things bad and fatal than there are upon each town and city, than there are streets in our towns and cities. We are in a semi-ancient trap that needs us to blame each other, even when correctly in defending, logic that it's only defenses of their means and needs to exploit. How they hide putting fake things in databases. How they hide roles with what is actually recorded. They have conscious uses of public schools and private schools, and of elderly homes simultaneously for the same racketeering, which exploits it at other locations like parks. Eric Jensen said he brought, so I learned about things a lot too, because people would say things to me that you knew it was not. They were told to say it by someone else, and relative to they were placed in my classroom with relevant criminally foreign influence uses of them and of me, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly. But where and how that abuses of themselves and of me, myself, simultaneously, non-distinctly is discernible, because that's what's actually recorded. Because these are also names relevant to where and to how they really have motivated. And you also have to know how they make things up. They make things up into branch fabricating audio and video transcripts, even with the news. That's juxtaposed distinct natures and methods of wire crimes at once, including per uses of their telephones. And they don't cover it up. So a certain kind of psychopath that just keeps going on with story from story, pretending not to realize, and pretending they don't realize that, they're pretending that they want to be about positive things by being, by hiding, being criminal natures and positive. So there's a Roger Suzanne and our others who intercities have roles with stories about kids, where he has roles of relevance with more people down the child defender registry, involved with Wethersfield Police and FBI and state police, and people at forensics location involved with the same house that is tied to a whole bunch of other ones with the names further involved, like a Phil Colella brought up by the confessions of this Bob Chase, who's also involved with various natures of courts with physical delusions, but also with simultaneously juxtaposed criminally foreign influence, factual nature, evident qualities, aspects, and natures, evidences, uses, and crimes roles relevant with their patients and criminals since before they got caught. Middletown has a whole bunch of police forms and roles of police forms. Also, intercities involved with these names, like O'Brien with the Hartford police and police forms. There are a whole bunch of boyfriends of sisters of a spotter family. Don't get mad at me for this, please, because that's what they need you to do. And there's little spots in the Burlington Turnpike. These are people that put you guys in classes with me, so they can put fake things in databases. Now they're involved in interbranch forging and switching names. I can't get them on paper. I go on to Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom. I ask him in short words, please get me a name, get them on paper. See, they've been they put everyone with fake words with each other. So they could say, oh, people make things that don't make sense because they're lying about it. They've been using the right to lie. It's sustained where and how they don't have those rights to lie. And they've been hiding what they're actually recorded consciously involved with. So there is a Leahy family of men and women and of ones tied to them further involved with violence on off my street with the names involved, their patients and criminals involved with some untimely deaths. Roles on off Trinity College and with predicate acts with them with the fake conversations they pretend to be with themselves, and about legal cases where they're involved with former director of the FBI and his co-defendants and his defendant capacities since before they were, and those were his co-defendants were federal criminals from various other natures of federal crimes that were proven before that, which is relevant here. But in that too, because they were also involved with federal crimes on campuses I went to, where people are having narratives with the leaders of the campuses in the background, uses of their sense and sensibilities, criminally foreign influence uses of the daughters of the and of the kids of the mayors, the people who run the campuses, the people who run the colleges, the people who run the fire departments. They call it things like that politics. It's not politics. That truth is being used for lie. There's a breaching method involved here. This is everyone forced to use other people's names. There's a name, Brian Salvo, and now he's got a different name on Facebook. I never had a conversation with him in my life. I never was around him. I never had a class with him. That's one of the people involved with the name. There's a Dan King. I never had a conversation with him in my life either. These are people involved with hearing other people's names through others and then repeating things and pretending that's all they know and hiding from the responsibility and roles with planting fake conversations with me and hiding what I said regarding my needs to get them on paper too, regarding the people with the name Scalora too. Also further with the pattern of people with on the child sex offender registry as people involved with wire crimes and other natures of things like that with names on off the World Trade Center and the spots next to it, right? Leading up to the attack, long time leading up to the attack, professions too, of the morals involved with it. And with this Mr. Abruzzi involved with too, kids that communicate to others that they're going to pretend other, but they know that and how they're criminally foreign influenced, which is one of the things that's involved with where and how they pretend to be against racism. By the time you're in third grade, the interbranch kids and or the differentially too, timed with the areas of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and seriousness of people A through Z from other locations. They need to hide lie progressions preemptively at that moment and increasingly. They need to hide and maintain uses of subjects treatments being and having been abridged. Subjects like where and how and why the kids' scores are relevant the way they are and have been. With math, for example, where those arrays of opinions, non-opinions, are being having been employed by this breaching method relevant too. So they get away with it. One of the reasons too, they have people, what they call debate is effectively used by a breaching method distinctly from our own, but then our own individually grouped together distinctly for other motivations, natures, needs, interests, juxtaposed. But also all that, but I lost the thing. But this is long enough. But that's what we'll do. We'll stack means, not just release from because that has syntactical ties. That has nature ties. People just big tough guys into branch Facebook pages. As the names involved, there's a Ray Colo with one of the ones. I don't know who, if it's the real Ray Colo, but there's a on YouTube typed on a comment about drugs. No, that's what they do because they maintain their roles with drugs, with the interbranch and the exceptions natures tied to them that have been attaching other kids to fake roles with themselves and others, fake ties and natures of ties to them because they've been planting fake exceptions. Then if you say you don't know them, they'll try to show you a fake exception picture. There's something to do with Joshua Julian is one of the ones on the Facebook page with the principal child abuser and other people further involved with the name Ian, with some FBI involved with some upskirt pictures of the kids and uses of it and uses of names involved with the corners of the streets and like, for example, corners of streets next to schools. And it's also with a family that Delafair family is one of the ones with the Spada family with some judges and their family members who was involved with criminally with kids through time, with planting evidences, and with federal evidences, crimes, child abuses of juxtaposed natures, and identity thefts and frauds, trying to pretend to know people. I don't know Paul Kelly. I never had a conversation with him in my life. He made statements to me with people involved with Central Connecticut State University that has been involved with private schools and public school kids that are involved with identity theft, fraud, tricks. So in other words, this is worse than extortion when you can't get anyone on paper into branch, and increasingly they're stacking fake things in databases more. And they're attaching everyone and everyone around them to fake words with each other and with the people around us. And they force people to speak as a group so they can prevent finite, so they can maintain people's natural, rightful respect for the interbranch exploited. Or their disrespect, because there's also a right too for that. Since founding, they have not been able to speak for the law legitimately. It's recorded how that is effectively maintained. So, not one has trained. So there are more. There's also an officer, Jerry Miller, who's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He brought up names in the north side of my house. And that is recorded, all confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with people involved with the other sides of my house, where they use the sense and sensibility, to use Jane Austen's phrase, for federal crimes, where the investigators are recorded using the sense and sensibilities roles, criminally foreign influence, as names involved also with time uses of the areas of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and names associated with connected body dumping spots, as the ones as recorded for confirmed confessions on Facebook by the finances involved on all the state judicial branch offices, and with Dylan family members involved with them on off my street, also with the Joshua Julian on off the principal child abuser's Facebook page in my street per him, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the names further, involved with some untimely deaths. That's why they're getting mad at me. They have people involved with the Coast Guard and with the military. But these are people that are involved with foreign military too. So rather than make me use other people's names and them use mine, and allowing them to use mine, because you guys also force them to use mine, get them on paper, And so it's recorded that and how through time a Christopher Cullen and his family are involved with offensively with identity theft, fraud, slanders by people confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed, them involved with various natures of federal crimes with little kids. On and off campus is coordinated. I never had a class with him in my life. And these are judges involved with fabricating audio video with areas of overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people associated with guns. I don't know if they're involved with gun dealing chips and stuff like that. These are people all along routes and with the uses of routes relevant, like all along that route from where Main Street turns into Wells Road, and it goes all the way through Newington and into Central Connecticut State University, and no on off Paul Manafort Drive, Central Connecticut State University. And it goes by where Kolvinski's family lives or lived. And that's one of the names I didn't know at the time, who confirmed, sought me out to demonstrate, confess, record roles with federal crimes with evidences with an O'Brien family, even though I never seen them together in my life. I don't, in other words, those people have connections. Their connections are roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, time behind people's backs from other classrooms, They make fake exceptions they can't put on paper because they made fake conversation. I'm minding myself business, and I had manners with other people. I was never rude to other people on campuses. In other words, all exceptions that might appear to be a demonstration of other and demonstrate the same thing. So these people have been maintaining collusions, collusions, as only allowed to be manifest as humanity, science, bridged. So we can keep amending means to overcome that logic that allows our country's names to get away with hiding. That and how no practical reason, use Immanuel Kant's phrase, is allowed free speech, and others pretended simultaneously for breach, for breaching screen. And one is worse because it measures and maintains distinctly from how our own do. And for it, and none know, but that is true. So, in other words, follow the short words and get them on paper now. Fake branches, no one's here. I had a, okay, thank you. Fake branches, bow. Don't disbelieve. See and perceive. And step down as fast as possible. And there is seed to grow. The species body will help you know if that's the course. It's got nothing to do with the isms. You want to start with the isms debates, get us tactically denatured first. No voice could speak for that little girl who has to walk out onto the street on Park Street, let alone New York City. Here! I'll show you how to bring the peace. And see, they have those girls, the ones that they help, like the Emily or Amy on New Park Avenue, off of Park Street, involved with people with the military and with judges and prosecutors on all various courts, with former director of the FBI, his co-defendants. And before they were caught with various natures of federal crimes, before they were his co-defendants, they had also been recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the narratives as roles with predicate acts against me on off my campuses, but behind my back. They do little magic tricks with the databases relevant to the shootings and relevant to means we have to discern really what's happening through time. There are a whole bunch of people that use the sense and sensibilities of the campuses and universities, defenses of what they pretend to be their sense and sensibilities for the uses of their identity. That is tactically to maintain collusions with uses of the identity of Marbury versus Madison, effectively used by a breaching method to measure and maintain. That and how no locations, areas, and states have the integrity to interpret that properly while pretending other. And so screening uses of that have been abridged. And again, where it is relevant to where and how relevant, distinct, and connected. Also non-distinct sequence shifts, finite, active, group truths, increasingly valuable truths, and identity truths are gotten away with, being denied, and by people that pretend because they speak good. So it has something to do also with the spots next to the campuses, even Hartford Hospital and other campuses, medical campuses. But next to Hartford Hospital through time, and the spots next to that through time. A whole bunch of people tied with Eric Jensen also brought up confessions. Obviously, these are people's confessions from the past, also brought up by them, so they can pretend on bring up people's names from the past, so they can imply I had ties in nature as the ties to people I didn't. All exceptions are in demonstration of them having used that criminally, those exceptions criminally too. Like, in other words, there were criminally foreign influence class placements in classes I had and uses of that relevant. There was a report of a home break-in at the corner of Fairlane Drive and Carriage Hill recently is increasingly involved with other natures of credible threats that Wethersfield police hadn't have. In other words, they had a police guy who came into my speech class a year. I had to stay back when I was a senior now, and I didn't have one personal conversation with that teacher. It has roles with recorded ties to Washington, D.C., and people with the medical community, also as intelligence community, as FBI, other agencies and police forms with Wethersfield police families, people associated with Mike Pandolf and his brothers, involved with identity thefts and frauds, like with a Joshua Stryker, Joshua Schumack, Joshua Julian. They try to make film fake exceptions, but knowing me before they had parties where they had people together, and they knew they made me show up there, make it look like I know them. And there were people spreading lies about me in the background with families like a Violet family and ones that are associated with the doctors as police forms, also with them on off UConn College through time, that has been involved with Hartford Hospital and the Institute of Living on Hartford Hospital's campus that was founded in 1822 with slavery still left north and south colonies, and the counter to it also still contained collusions. We're against this stuff because there was no self. And so our founders left us to correlate this by speaking about what they actually left us to speak about, what is actually recorded, which was how they had to hide their roles, going against the breaching method's crazy laws tied to everyone's syntax, by entertaining syntax that they would not otherwise have entertained, and they would not otherwise spoke or allowed to be spoke. Smoke, pretended clear. So let's get prepared. In other words, we'll just stack the means to shut down the threats, or change the nature of it enough to work. Everyone can fathom and observe, because we could observe this once they agree to do that. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to put all these homeless people, pull where everyone's watching, so nothing can go wrong. You know what I mean? And we're going to address how we're going to afford, because wealth has not afforded to overcome since before cars. The suburbs were tactically denatured, let alone New York City. So cities across the world. Sickly distinctly, too, to keep out sickly non-distinctly, measured and maintained. Relied upon by all the identity grounds, locations, identities, individually grouped it together. That was propagated by the breaching method, which maintains that self-value by the only natures of industries. No, leaving out exception nature, how industries and economies themselves came to entertain, to self-value entertainment of needs to partake with economies that were still torture-driven, and to maintain that value would only be employed by the breaching method, uses of tactically denatured suburbs, let alone the worst. In other words, mass farming is relied upon. And those people are sickly, distinctly victims too, even if they're successful. But God is not, so when they say success, we have to be led by what is hyper invisible, but still discernible. We have to be led by what is actually hyper simultaneous and positive to itself. Otherwise, Earth's special difference is forced by its identity of relationship to itself, to all parts of itself. That will never change and only increase its value. We could change and be other systems than its own, as has been since some ancient times, but nature will keep demonstrating that as cause to negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature's means. So a little kid, by third grade, before third grade, that we have means. You can understand how we have means. That the colonial, the settlers and all that, what they call it, the settlers. There's a breaching method that was employed. There was slavery going on, witch trials. Oh, call it the settlers were worried about the mental health of the people. They'll react wrong. People react wrong because everyone was lying to them since they were kids. The same ones that pretend from backgrounds that they perceive people to be prejudiced or racist. Those are people involved consciously with the names confessing, demonstrating, recording that they're simultaneously they're communicating that that they know they're criminally foreign influence various ways. It has nature and involved with stacking illusions and databases and the relevance of that. But they're going to pretend others simultaneously. They know that their motivations were in our not just with their own and with their parents. And they just don't know. They don't know the extent of it. But they know they can't be honest about how they know they're exploiting it worse with needs actually to properly treat all the individual grouped and together in positions upon our cities each. So we can't leave out how the patients and criminals of the interbranch and innocent people too, they're recorded fabricating audio and video against more. They have individuals with more crimes against Hartford than there are streets in Hartford in single individuals. You wake up, get me heard, please, someone. If you're going to speak on here and try to, let's just talk about life. This is a serious conversation. This is about hyper-predicate acts delivery system method. This is about hyper-criminal insidiousness delivery system method called worse than just criminal insidiousness. When we talk about the course of black pupils, whites of eyes abridged. Now we are prevented from calm speech to address roles as punks with these topics, and we are prevented aggressive speech to address it too. And only punks are allowed to speak on it, or they attach you to fake words, fake locations, especially if you point out the relevance of it, and which we all have to be able to take, because we could all do it. You have to watch, and you have to allow mandated law at locations where and how they have wire crimes and the roles with the news media. With predicate acts, these were our simultaneously roles while pretending other with predicate acts on off elections locations, further hyper additionally on and off the Wethersfield town offices It has something to do with their roles with Russians and with Afghanistan leadership from Wethersfield and Hartford, as the names are also on off the World Trade Center involved directly and indirectly with this Leahy family. And there's a Rick C.M. Faglione, who's also one of the ones who sought me out after he graduated to make confessions, which connected to people like a former. There's an eighth grade teacher I had, the only class I ever had with him, and with Mr. Neville. Mr. Neville has roles with some names at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with predicate acts on off my street, with uses of sense and sensibilities of people where names uses are forced collusions with such, and where relevant were our roles with the uses of the programs as elderly, with the elderly, and with the tied locations, and with the children, and with the tied locations, and with the tied economic value narratives, because that's relative to where also discernible is how preemptively people need to pretend passions and emotions, where and how they know others. So in other words, because you couldn't need to and should say short words like I caught bad things happening on off a location, especially on off campuses. See, we have not been able to do this because the only identities of the law have state collusion on off these locations, individually grouped and together. And with areas of overt criminal enterprises and private ones as involved, foreign and domestic military. They have corners of streets involved with this, relevant to what designed the suburbs, north and south colonies, since before our founders were born, before cars were even invented, let alone cranes, trucks. The suburbs were designed tactically natured. Anyone who wants to pretend that they don't believe that New York City is tactically denatured, or that Hartford, Connecticut is, if they anyone who tries to pretend they don't believe Hartford, Connecticut is tactically denatured, their logic is going to show proofs of it itself. It's going to have inherent active and increasingly demonstrations of how it would be increasingly, worse than proper logic. Tactically delusions wrong, tactically criminally foreign awful factory major quality aspects and natures needed to get away with, reliance upon such logic. So, vaccines. Then we'll stack the means. One way redeems. So there's a whole bunch of different ways we could do with the population that have no home. People could get rewarded. You could have exploited areas. They can't afford to upkeep and all that. In other words, everything's scattered. That's why when you see you see people. There are videos on YouTube, like watch about your state and look at other states. Drive through. Just look up in the YouTube search engine. Drive through Connecticut. Drive through New York. You know what I mean? They also have videos called like the worst neighborhoods. And you'll see that there's this manifest conjunction to how they designed the colonial homes with slavery, north and south colonies, since before our founders were born. And the relevance of where and how. They wanted us to explain how they had to leave it entrenched north and south. And how, for example, it was because the employments of it had nothing to do with that. They had to do with the positive and negative treatments to keep the exceptions, except, well, of course, it has to do with it, where we have to explain things, leaving out the breaching method, though, leaving out its uses of it. It was using everyone. Now you're entertaining. You're psychopaths. You're entertaining slavery. Even if you're entertaining the course of black people's rights of eyes abridged, you're a psychopath. See, we have the experts on psychopaths as psychopaths still. And so they haven't taught you how to understand the words in the dictionary properly. I'm not even a doctor. I'll help you delineate their delusions from their criminally foreign influenced natures and souls. But we have to counter how the interbranch family members and the intercampuses have been running into high life aggressions by using their places together, by using name stacking. And we'll overcome this with mean stacking. Forgiveness was for them, but is also to give people for hotels, because they are offensively preventing people from telling, so they could say, "Oh, look, it pertains personal." What's recorded is where and how, from backgrounds and all investigators, just themselves entertaining themselves as an identity of the law. They can't entertain themselves that way. If they try to entertain themselves properly, they'll be sensed and discerned and hurt and worse. Let's all rehearse. So we must read each other's minds. So obviously these people are all classified. They're not allowed to speak about things. So only ones who will speak are little fake punks who are self-valuing while pretending they don't realize how the fake uses of their fake integrity of identities as identities of law individually grouped it together too. The lawyers too, fabricating audio and video, wire crime acts and methods, predicate acts. Get ready, play games. Make sure I get a response on paper, or so we have to stack names. We're going to get to the bottom of it. Make sure you get former director of the FBI and the other ones involved with Middletown too. It's a whole bunch of people with confessions tied to Middletown, involved with identity thefts, fraud, slanders, with the FBI and with the people on my street, involved with the mayors, criminally involved, ties to the mayors, criminally involved. We got women that made threats to me that are tied to not even respond to. And there was a guy yelling at a woman in Hartford Hospital. Hope to God that you guys didn't pretend that was me speaking, because that's one of the guys on off the community center in Weathersfield. Also recorded, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people intercities, with the medical locations, with crimes with other countries, and with of all juxtaposed natures on off those locations and the ones next to them too, and uses of that relevant. Fear God. Make sure I get a response. Make sure you don't waste time. Make sure you get them on paper too, and make sure you apologize to those girls and their mothers that you've been playing games with, like the people with modern pastry. And if I was a little rude there or whatever on Facebook, too, make sure you don't exploit that exception, because these are people I had to figure out how to respond, because you guys are the ones that went out of the way to fabricate audio and video. And now these are names that you also did this. You touched everyone around me, including my friends from Saudi Arabia. You attached them to fake audio and video with people tied to my grammar school that I had nothing to do with. I even saw them on the grammar school campus, and people tied to them as people at other campuses involved with predicate acts, and with the timing of it, uses of it relevant on and off the spots next to the state capitol, and confessions tied. These are people involved with the lawyers of the FBI too, with roles with federal crimes, and with names on off campuses and on off courts, planting sequence shifts roles and other predicate acts. you will watch how stupid, sick, naive, fake pretends it's complicated, and how complicated pretends it's simple. Exactly the way the breaching wants. The simultaneous was is denied its voice. Our things, boxing. Make sure you get them onto name. Who deny? Who disbelieves? Have the interbranch. This is someone who disbelieves. If you don't want to give me writing, and I want the police report that Bob Chase says. Bob Chase said that Phil Claus on it. Now he had Bob Chase is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Right now, actively, increasingly involved with proven child sex offenders and other natures of federal criminals and patients forced of his and people, the doctors associated with him that also brought up the name Christine. There are a bunch of people with the name Christine who are involved with this game with little fake punks using people's names behind them and with the class placements recorded criminally foreign influence for relevant uses of it. Make sure you get them on paper. WFSB, they have this Roger Suzanne, and they have names through time on Route 3 that use my name, like Roger Suzanne, attaching me to fake conversations with other fake ties to others. There's a Rob Rodriguez. They apparently took a picture of me to make it look like I had a conversation with them at all on Route 3 with one of the people involved on and off campuses with relevant juxtaposed natures of organized crime and uses of that relevant between the campuses too, vertically and horizontally. Now, this Mr. Apuzzi is also involved with the Ray Reynolds, with the Harris family, involved with criminally foreign influence uses of the youngest kids, like a kindergarten that closed that has people involved with various natures of crimes with kids through time and their uses of their family members, and as natures as relevant roles recorded with which is the polling campus, Quinnipiac University. Thank God it's every campus that's having been used by this breaching method, singular. The same way the computer works by one singular method, that is a method /s. This is how the breaching method, they use computers since before electrical computers. This is exploiting the criminally re-engineered republic for which we stand since some ancient times. Criminally re-engineered. Syntactical possession of the human fact-keeping nature is simultaneous with the function of where and how the sciences share an identity, differentially, especially critically, to questions. They make use of the needs for the names and the words of the identities of the sciences. And then further, where there are identities of locations. All that is changed per how it has conjunctions to where and how we are actually syntactically manifest, to where and how Earth's especial difference is really syntactically relative. The identity of that which is hyper-relativity, that hyper-relative can be discerned as a conjunction to the relativity between, but while as the subject as a distinct identity of volume from the predicate, but as one non-distinctly too. And again, this is where and how functional it is that and how the hyper-invisible is distinct from the invisible but still discernible. And that extent comes with the needs for prayer to be discerned, and more probably having been, it has to do with you have to contemplate what you know is simultaneously true, to come with an answer to a question, /S, to come with an answer to, to perfect, to reveal that better than perfect, which makes more and more perfect everywhere it is. Or it is forced from here, part of it, which is Earth's especial difference, which simultaneously is part of the demonstration of how it has positive or negative identity of relationship to itself as a forever nature, distinctly from how it has as a temporary nature. And the difference between that can be hyper additionally added to by a method that reveals evolution's gifts, means out of nowhere, positive value nature progressions, action natures everywhere at once, right through fake branches of government everywhere they stand. That's only where they stand. Science has not spoken, used these evidences. These are archaeological evidences and the value of them, like where and how the suburbs are tactically denatured, let alone cities. And where and how people speak for logic. Get down or gather around. I admit, you should just get on paper and speak with these short words. You get them on paper to one name and sequence. These people using the phones to keep stupid fakes, punks, with the interbranch where they were using and having used the right to lie where they don't. So rather than make it that stay, so it makes it look like I have a personal against the interbranch because they lie about the exception nature, because they started that too. They leave out the others involved. To discern the breaching method, for example, which is recorded, they attacked the World Trade Center. These are the names involved leading up to that, with the proving after the attack was post-dated documents in the World Trade Center. People are hiding this with a sick nature. As the names evolve further with the campuses criminally involved, make sure they get onto paper too, because I've been waiting a long time for a response. I called the Hartford courts, New Britain Superior Court, at locations criminally involved before the World Trade Center, and I caught them hiding it and how getting away with it intercities through time. Control your mind. Make sure you don't hide and have people keep speaking to you like, oh, what's your subject? You got to follow mandated law. Make sure I get a response for the forging names, switching names, fabricating audio and video. Make sure I get a response for the campuses. I'll show you what makes the fake sciences a bridge to pretend they don't realize how the relevance of the other natures of criminal insidiousness while they're speaking about subjects and who's receiving, who's doing their homework. Get down. Make sure I get a goddamn name right fast. Excuse my language, kids. Make sure Wethersfield leadership gets on paper now. I found a whole bunch of more confessions relevant. They know this. They fabricated emails. You watch how bad they're doing things through you and to you. And with what? By fake branches shot. Fake down!